the verdict. Okay, said Dad finally, rubbing his palm over his face. Obviously, we understand the seriousness of the situation now, and we will do something about it. I don't think I've ever seen Dad look so uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Dad. Well, we have some recommendations, answered Dr. Jansen. Obviously, we want to help everyone involved. Thank you for understanding, said Mom, getting her pocketbook ready as if she were getting up. But there are some consequences, said Mr. Tushman, looking at Mom. Excuse me? She shot back at him. As I said in the beginning, Dr. Jansen interjected, the school has a very strict anti-bullying policy. Yeah, we saw how strict it was when you didn't expel Jack Will for punching Julian in the mouth, Mom answered quickly. Yeah, take that, Mr. Tushman. Oh, come on, that was completely different, Mr. Tushman answered dismissively.
Grace Rogers, can you come to the office?
Yeah, Grace.
Come to the office.
Go to the office. See you, Grace. Oh, come on, that was completely different, Mr. Tushman answered dismissively. Oh, answered Mom, punching someone in the face isn't bullying to you? Okay, said Dad, raising his hand to keep Mr. Tushman from answering. Let's just cut to the chase, okay? What exactly are your recommendations, Hal? Dr. Jansen looked at him. Julian is being suspended for 2 weeks, he said. What? Yelled Mom, looking at Dad, but Dad didn't look back. In addition, said Dr. Jansen, we're recommending counseling. Nurse Molly has the names of several therapists who we think Julian should see. This is outrageous, interrupted Mom, steaming. Wait, I said, you mean I can't go to school? Not for 2 weeks, answered Mr. Tushman, starting immediately. But what about the trip to the nature retreat? I asked. You can't go, he answered coldly. No, I said, and now I really was about to cry. I want to go to the nature retreat. I'm sorry, Julian, Dr. Jansen said gently. This is absolutely ridiculous, said Mom, looking at Dr. Jansen. Don't you think you're overreacting a little? That kid didn't even read the notes. That's not the point, answered Mr. Tushman. I'll tell you what I think, said Mom. This is because you admitted a kid into a school who shouldn't have been admitted into the school in the first place. And you broke the rules to do it. And now you're just taking this out on my kid because I'm the one who had the guts to call you on it. Melissa, said Dr. Jansen, trying to calm her down. These children are too young to deal with things like this. Facial deformities, disfigurement. Mom continued, talking to Dr. Jansen. You must see that. Julian's had nightmares because of that boy. Did you know that? Julian has anxiety issues. Mom, I said, clenching my teeth. The board should have consulted about whether Beecher Prep was the right place for a child like that, Mom continued. That's all I'm saying. We're just not set up for it. There are other schools that are, but we are not. You can choose to believe that if you want, answered Mr. Tushman, not looking at her. Mom rolled her eyes. This is a witch hunt, she muttered quietly, looking out of the window. She was fuming. I had no idea what she was talking about. Witches? What witches? Okay, Hal, you said you had some recommendations, Dad said to Dr. Jansen. He sounded gruff. Is that it? 2 week suspension and counseling? We'd also like for Julian to write a letter of apology to August Pullman, said Mr. Tushman. Apology for what exactly? Answered Mom. He wrote some stupid notes. Surely he's not the only kid in the world who's ever written a stupid note. It's more than a stupid note, answered Mr. Tushman. It's a pattern of behavior. He started counting on his fingers. It's the making faces behind the kid's back. It's the game he initiated, where if someone touches Augie, he has to wash his hands. I couldn't believe Mr. Tushman even knew about the plague game. How do teachers know so much? It's social isolation, Mr. Tushman continued. It's creating a hostile atmosphere. And you know for a fact that it's Julian who initiated all this? Asked Dad. Social isolation? Hostile atmosphere? Are you saying that Julian was the only kid who wasn't nice to this boy? Or are you suspending every kid who stuck his tongue out at this kid? Good one, Dad. Score one for the Albanses. Doesn't it trouble you at all that Julian doesn't seem to be showing the least bit of remorse? Said Mr. Tushman, squinting at Dad. Okay, let's just stop right there, Dad said quietly, pointing his finger in Mr. Tushman's face. Please, everyone, said Dr. Jansen, let's calm down a bit. Obviously, this is difficult. After all we've done for this school, Mom answered, shaking her head. After all the money and the time we've put into this school, you would think we'd get just a little bit of consideration. She put her thumb and her index finger together. Just a little. Dad nodded. He was still looking angrily at Mr. Tushman, but then he looked at Dr. Jansen. Melissa's right, he said. I think we deserved a little better than this, Hal. Friendly warning would have been nice. Instead, you call us in here like children. He stood up. We deserved better. I'm sorry you feel that way. said Dr. Jansen, standing up as well. The Board of Trustees will hear about this, said Mom. She got up too. I'm sure they will, answered Dr. Jansen, crossing his arms and nodding. Mr. Tushman was the only adult still sitting down. The point of the suspension isn't punitive, he said quietly. We're trying to help Julian too. He can't fully understand the ramifications of his actions if you keep trying to justify them away. We want him to feel some empathy. You know, I've heard just about enough, said Mom, holding her palm in front of Mr. Tushman's face. I don't need parenting advice. Not from someone who doesn't have kids of his own. You don't know what it's like to see your kid having a panic attack every time he shuts his eyes to go to sleep, okay? You don't know what it's like. Her voice cracked a bit, like she was going to cry. She looked at Dr. Jansen. This affected Julian deeply, Hal. I'm sorry if that's not politically correct to say, but it's the truth, and I'm just trying to do what I think is best for my son. That's all. Do you understand? Yes, Melissa, Dr. Jansen answered softly. Mom nodded. Her chin quivered. Are we done here? Can we go now? Sure, he answered. Come on, Julian, she said. She walked out of the office. I stood up. I admit I wasn't exactly sure what was going on. Wait, is that it? I asked. But what about my things? All my stuff's in my locker. Miss Rubin will get your things ready and she'll get them to you later this week, answered Dr. Jansen. He looked at Dad. I'm really sorry it came to this, Jules. He held out his hand for a handshake. Dad looked at his hand but didn't shake it. He looked at Dr. Jansen. It's the only thing I want from you, Hal, he said quietly. I want that all of this, be kept confidential. Is that clear? It doesn't go beyond this room. I don't want Julian turned into some kind of anti-bullying poster boy by the school. No one is to know he's been suspended. We'll make up some excuse about why he's not in school, and that's it. Are we clear, Hal? I don't want him made into an example. I'm not going to stand by while this school drags my family's reputation through the mud. Oh, by the way, in case I hadn't mentioned it before, Dad's a lawyer. Dr. Jansen and Mr. Tushman exchanged looks. We are not looking to make an example of any of our students, Dr. Jansen answered. This suspension really is about a reasonable response to an unreasonable behavior. Give me a break, answered Dad, looking at his watch. It's a massive overreaction. Dr. Jansen looked at Dad, and then he looked at me. Julian, he said, looking at me right in the eye, can I ask you something point blank? I looked at Dad, who nodded. I shrugged. Do you feel at all remorseful for what you've done? Dr. Jansen asked me. I thought about it a second. I could tell all the grown-ups were watching me, waiting for me to answer something magical that would make this whole situation better. Yes, I said quietly. I'm really sorry I wrote those last notes. Dr. Jansen noted. Is there anything else you feel remorse for? He asked. I looked at Dad again. I'm not an idiot. I knew what he was dying for me to say. I just wasn't going to say it. So I looked down and shrugged. Can I ask you this then? Said Dr. Jansen. Will you consider writing Augie a letter of apology? I shrugged again. How many words does it have to be? Was all I could think to say. I knew the moment I said it that I probably shouldn't have. Dr. Jansen looked at my dad, who just looked down. Julian, he said, go find Mom. Wait for me by the reception area. I'll be out in a second. Just as I closed the door on my way out, Dad started whispering something to Dr. Jansen and Mr. Tushman. It was a hushed, angry whisper. When I got to the reception area, I found Mom sitting on a chair with her glasses on. I sat down next to her. She rubbed my back, but she didn't say anything. I think she'd been crying. I looked at the clock, 10:20 a.m. Right about now, Miss Rubin was probably going over the results of yesterday's quiz in science class. As I looked around the lobby, I had a blip of a memory that day before school started, when me and Jack, Will, and Charlotte had met up here before meeting our welcome buddy for the first time. I remember how nervous Jack had been that day, and how I didn't even know who Augie was. So much had happened since then.